Hey everybody, it's your buddy Beard Grizzly, and sorry for the time away. Per usual, life, work, and self have to come first, and the time I've at least had to do much of anything, I've at least wanted to prioritize playing Destiny and get into the lore as much as I can. Anymore, I fancy myself a cataloger a bit more than I do much else, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, not what any of you are here for, but I know some ask, so I wanted to get it out of the way ahead of time. The major thing we're here today to do is look over all of the lore that really matters within the game at this point, or at least from the campaign itself of Shadowkeep, and getting at least a small handle on what each lore book might have to tell us that's introduced in the expansion. I've had time to do that, at least, even if I've been unable to write it all down. My memory is definitely better on some of these books than others, and I'm sure it'll show. Also, I know that Byf and others have already looked into the campaign, so if you don't care to hear my thoughts on that, you can skip to this timestamp for just the initial scrapings of the lore books. Hope that helps. Let's start with what matters, the campaign of Shadowkeep. I'm starting here as I've already gone over the basics of the introduction we received from Bungie in the narrative preview before Shadowkeep was released, so if you're interested in that, well, here's a summation, but I'll also leave the video linked for you as well. Eris went poof about the time of the Age of Triumph in Destiny 1. For about a year or so, she was lost to all of us, and found herself in a Hive throne world that was unknown to her. But she had a fair feeling it was of our cunning friend, Savathun, sister of Oryx, now dead and long past. Totally dead. Never coming back. Sure. Anyway, sarcasm aside, she was able to leave this Ascendant plane and found herself running around with the Queen of the Awoken, Mare. I've been thinking that this is when Mare went poof on us in Forsaken, and we may start to see her again at some point here, being that whatever Eris and Mare found out in their scavenging led Eris back to Luna. And of course, the rest is somewhat history. At least after Eris ran off from a small visit to the tower with Ikora. Shadowkeep begins from there. We know the campaign, but I figured it important to go over it and give you my general thoughts all the same, especially from mission to mission, or at least mostly. Shadowkeep's main campaign is pretty short. The idea from Bungie was to make it more of a Rise of Iron length expansion, which I still find it to be a bit shorter than that, especially the after-action activities being very quick to go through. The difference here, however, is that we'll be tablespoon-fed some content over time, and that's why it's difficult to accurately review Shadowkeep's story. But I will say, I'm enjoying what we have so far. Anyway, I'm letting the commentator in me come out a bit, but I'll stay on point here as much as I can. We start off with Eris poking the bear, or, well, as hibernative as the Hive have been around the Anchor of Light. Funny enough, I made mention of this with one of the Stolen Intelligence entries entitled Fragment. I'll read off the portion of the entry that matters. Last week, I was deployed by ICO 006 for routine surveillance of the quarantine zone outside the Hellmouth. Hive populations remain low and grow ever lower thanks to the efforts of a small contingent of veteran guardians who have made their homes on Luna. Also, kind of find the little small tidbit to those that still play Destiny 1, a little bit of a handoff there. Anyway, but the Scarlet Keep pops out of the ground and all bets are off. I still say that the writer to this entry was Fenchurch Eris, by the by, but I'm curious where the rest of that Fragment entry might go. I'll have to revisit that one day. Anyway, the opening mission shows us Eris Morn underneath Luna, looking around in some Hive tunnels. She slides her hand along what looks to be some type of activation rune or otherwise, and suddenly the cavern she's in opens up. The Vanguard scramble out several Guardians, at least, though it seems more of an all-call is opened up to head to the lunar surface. We arrive, and point by point, we break through Hive stations and defensive points, ending up inside some more tunnels, possibly the ones Eris herself was in just a bit ago. But that's the good part. The offensive we ran is cut short by a looming visage of what we all know is one of the pyramids, but one that's seemingly been here for a long time, dormant, and not doing much of anything. We've seen snippets of them, The story has been teasing them enough, from the post-credits of Destiny 2's vanilla campaign, to the Queen's focus being on them, to the Drifter holding a coin that shows one of them. All of it leads to us seeing the real thing. But so close to Earth? How does that make any sense? Well, not revealed in the story. Yet. So we'll have to wait for the time being. Even then, I've already got some theories on that with the lore books, but that's going to take a lot of time to really dig into things. Anyway, Eris Morn pulls us from the brink after we see our past enemies start to rise up. Crota was the first, but then we see the Fanatic and Gaul, visions of our past that don't seem quite right. We also acquire a curious item from the manifestation of Crota, almost like it wanted us to do so, but that would never happen, right? We wouldn't just be handed something and led down a path that was supposed to be there, right? I don't think my sarcasm was thick enough on that one. Upon being pulled from the combat, we see Eris, who is being haunted by a red figure as well, floating behind her and following her wherever she might go. This is the vision of Mota, one of Eris' past fire teammates that went with her to fight Crota for the second time after an event called the Great Disaster. I've already covered that in several ways on this channel, so if you're interested in that history, I'll leave a couple links handy. This will not be the last vision that haunts Eris on her time here on Luna. It only gets worse. Eris tells us about this pyramid that we see, but she's also unsure of its true purpose and how it even came to be locked inside the surface of Luna. But she does make it clear what the goal is: to get inside and find out. Or hope to. You know, as a side thought here, we see it heretical to enter the Traveler, as us within the city. If these pyramids are truly opposite to that of the Traveler, I wonder if that would be seen as the same by some force. The darkness, the hive, whatever. Oh well. Religious persecution is a real heavy-handed topic anyway, and one steeped in perspective to begin with, isn't it? Anyway, our quest starts with entering the Scarlet Keep. Eris figures if anyone's going to have some general leads to entering the pyramid, it's most likely the Hive. They knew, or seemingly knew, of its existence, and perhaps know of ways to counteract its effects, pushing past the barrier of energy it seems to erect, being the first obstacle that we have to tackle. We discover that the nightmares are being used by the Hive for some type of ritual, or are themselves a ritual. So what's the purpose? How are the Hive unaffected by the nightmares and the power they seem to have against us, or at least haunting us? This is the piece that interests me the most about the nightmares in general. They are manifestations of our own torment and our own past. They are schisms into our psyche, and they feed on our insecurities. Seeing some of these visions return, and our guardian seeing them, well, you as the player may just see it as another item on the list to shut down, but our guardian might think of it very differently. Or who knows? Maybe they just see it as another item to be shut down as well. You know, those Cyrus ideas of what a guardian is, and so on, of course, being a basic idea there. Anyway, after we investigate the outsides of the keep, we go back to Eris. She was harried by a Hive wizard, but the artifact we uncovered seems to dispatch or push the wizard away. What it hasn't pushed off, however, is another manifested nightmare. This time of Veltarlo, a titan of the First Pillars, an order that first formed as watchers of the city. Regardless of that, he was killed in the events of the doomed fireteam assault on the Hellmouth so many years ago. But he's back to cause Eris more troubled memories that may not necessarily be her own fault. I'd be remiss if I didn't say the Hive Wizard was the one that killed Mota, however. Omnigul, the mate of Crota, and a real pain in the back end to stop, I might add. Eris hands us the first of many essences that our main goal is to purify. This first essence is called the Essence of Despair. This essence can be purified by Eris initially, who will give you your class item of a particularly odd armored set called Dreambane Armor. This is not entirely unlike that of another item that we've heard of already, but it took a lot more to craft. You know, walking down Sorrow's Road or something like that. Every rose has its... You know what? I think you get it. Obviously, the difference here is that we have an essence and are attempting to purify it, not really attempting to understand it to its essence. I can't think of any other way to explain it, really. I'd like to take a moment and list all of the essences that we have and what they unlock, so here we go. Despair, Dreambane Armor class item. Pride, the Dreambane Armor helmet. Isolation, Dreambane Armor arms. Fear, Dreambane Armor chest piece. Anguish, Dreambane Armor legs. Rage, one small step, a shotgun. Greed, a fine memorial, which is a machine gun. Obscurity, every waking moment, the SMG. Vanity, Tranquility, a sniper rifle. Brutality, Loud Lullaby, a hand cannon. Jealousy, Night Terror, a sword. Failure, Arc Logic, an auto rifle. Envy, Premonition, a pulse rifle. Servitude, Dreambreaker, a fusion rifle. And Insanity, Love and Death, a grenade launcher. I know some of them aren't obtainable yet. That's what I've been able to see around the internet, anyway. I only have 12 of them currently, but along the entirety of the campaign, you're at least granted the armor. And that's actually the entire goal, along with screwing up the Hive's plans. I so do enjoy doing that. That largely is what the campaign is left to be. A Phantom of Toland is seen with Eris after we cleanse the essence of despair, and Eris asks us for further acquisitions of more essences and also more Hive talismans that she can kind of kit-bash together to give us more armor. Basically, it's time to mingle more dark powers with our own armor. We find more essence from the manifestation of Omnigul after slaying it than a tome from one of the daughters of Crota named Hashladun. This tome tells of an item called the Cryptoglyph. The name alone really sends several questions into my mind, most of which deal with a certain field we covet in our current city-age, cryptoarchaeology. I wonder if there's any general link between them or just the name itself. Both deal with runes, and by technicality that's kind of what the Cryptarchs are also utilizing to unlock things and so on. Good old engrams, gotta love them. There is one general question I have, however. The Tablets of Ruin created by Oryx using the Husk of Akka to use the power of the Taking, or quite possibly a piece of the Dark itself, were less powerful than the Cryptoglyph? Eris claims that she knows of no other piece of Hive artifacting that is more powerful than the Cryptoglyph. Perhaps I'm misinterpreting this piece of information, but I do find it weird. If you think I'm wrong on this one, obviously let me know down below, but I just found that part in the story a little odd to me, just based on power and what we know of the Hive so far. Anyway, that's our obvious next goal, and with it we have the ability to craft any of the weapons and armor pieces that we may want to, provided we have the proper essence. Of course, Eris is now bothered by the specter of Omar Aga, another that was killed in the Hellmouth on the same fire team. Because every time it seems like we kill one of the nightmares on that side or perform a certain task, we basically just make Eris's life a living hell, even though it already is. I feel like I just placed myself in a really bad situation here, so I'm just gonna nope out of this. Our goal is to head further into the Hellmouth and find an area called the Catacombs. This area hides the Cryptoglyph from us, and boy is it dark down there. Inside the Catacombs, we learn a few more pieces of Eris, that this is where she stayed for a fair majority of her time. We also are able to see the pyramid off to the side, which makes it very known that the Hive knew of its presence this whole time. There is also another daughter of Crota that guards this artifact. Her name is Bessereth, and with her death, 2 daughters of Crota remain. To my knowledge, we haven't met them just yet, however, but that's for a bit later on here as to where we get that information about the daughters of Crota. With our stealing and acquisition of the Cryptoglyph a success, we return to Eris to find that she is becoming increasingly frustrated with the phantoms that haunt her. Ariana 3 is now there as well, and that finishes off the major figures that were around her in the Hellmouth on that fateful day. Saimota, Omar Agam, Valtarlo, Ariana 3, Toland. Now she is bothered and harried by her past. Now all of the major players are on the field of battle, which truly is in our minds. Anyway, psychological warfare besides, we still have armor to craft, and so that's our next duty. That is after we talk with Ikora. Ikora makes it plain. She wasn't sure about this report of a pyramid that was under Luna, but she came up to see it for herself. She apologizes for all the torment that Eris has gone through, and commands us to heed whatever words Eris has for us, and give her all the support that she needs besides. This is counter to past moments with the Vanguard as a whole, but Ikora's always been on our side a bit more than Zavala, at least I would say. For now, we still have to create the rest of the Dreambane armor in order to pierce through the energy wall that the pyramid has around itself. So it's off to hunt some more nightmares. Skolas, the Kell of Kells, twice jailed by Mare and the failure of his people, the Elixni, twice over. His hubris got the better of him. Tannix the Scarred, murderer, lone member of a broken house, out for hire to the highest bidder, even after he was killed by Cade, killed by us, and then killed a second time by us. It's still wondered if he was truly ever defeated. Finally, Fogoth, an ogre of the summoning pits that we put down before he could even become unchained. But make no mistake, he was in service to the Hive in Crota, nonetheless. All of these moments were from our past. All of these moments are of our victories. So why does the dark, these nightmares, tempt us with reminding us of our victories? Well, why don't we enter the pyramid and find out? We've created the whole of the armor, after all. Piercing the veil. It's a phrase we hear often when dealing with anything mysterious. This time is no different. It's also a pattern that is constant for us as a guardian. We find the unknown. We grow stronger against it by understanding it. We go, and we stamp it out. Passing through all the caverns that we traversed before, we're then taken into the pyramid as a guest. What happens to us is expected. What happens to our ghost, however, not as much.
Welcome. We've been waiting.
Our ghost acting like this isn't entirely new. The first time we hear him a bit sad and downtrodden was when we were cut off from the light during the Red War. The second time that is questionable, however, is when Rasputin seemingly talked through our ghost in the Arecibo mission. That ghost can be influenced by the dark. Well, that's a discussion in and of itself. We fight the 3 original phantoms that we see early on in the campaign. Gaul, the Fanatic, Crota. All throughout we are harassed by this force through our ghost, making us question everything that's happened. Cade's death, our failure in stopping the Red War from even beginning, how we allowed for Crota to cut down thousands of us, one by one. All of these failures, all of these torments. And it leads us to the end of our journey inside the pyramid, with an unknown artifact and a message, one that will now haunt us for quite some time.
You made it. We have heard your cries for help, and soon we will answer. Who are you? Don't you recognize us? We are not your friend. We are not your enemy. We are your salvation.
I want to look into these claims by this vision, but I feel like that needs to be a piece all on its own. My thoughts are linked to others that have prepared different ways for us to combat against these ideas and perspectives that the darkness are throwing our way. It's a thing we need to look over from another. The other. The best of us, some might say. Again, that's for another time. Needless to say, I do not agree with most of what this vision says. In some cases, it's entirely contradictory. After this message, however, we're sent right back to Eris Morn, who gives us the bad news. The nightmares are going out further than Luna now, as it seems the power of the pyramid might be getting a bit stronger. Is the Traveler still that weak that it can't counteract these nightmares? Or is this just a plot device, and there to give us a reason to go back to old activities? You decide. Well, the doom and gloom of this is all over for now. There's really not a lot to add to the story campaign of Shadowkeep. In all accounts, it's rather straightforward if you've been playing for a while, and if you haven't, then you've got most of the small details already out of it. This isn't to say Luna itself isn't devoid of mystery, but the campaign is pretty easy to follow. If I can go into commentary mode for a moment, what I just went over is the whole of the conversations and ideas of Shadowkeep. As much as my description adds on a fair amount of time and my trying to fill in the gaps is also there, this expansion at current is leaving me a bit wanting for more. That's both good and bad. It means I still love this franchise and I'm interested in its future, but I am also unsure how to feel about the length of the campaign. My dawdling around and contacting Destiny 2 servers time still had me clear it within about 5 hours on opening day. And that's with some breaks for dinner, care about the house, and etc. I also find myself back in original activities more often than I do newer ones, and that's not a bad thing as it holds testament to those activities already in place, but it also calls question to the general principles of those new ones that have been presented to me. I keep all these pieces and thoughts in my head rattling around, but also knowing that Bungie has gone through some movement in the past several months, with the split from Activision Blizzard, the change in staff, the alterations of teams, the changes in the armor system, the move to Steam and cross-save even just alone for PC and beyond. None of these should be held against the team for the time they put into them, and all of them have everything to do with the development of the project and the longevity of Destiny. None of this has anything to do with the next half of this video, which is my thoughts on the lore books that have been supplied to us. Thanks for letting me deviate a bit again, however, but let's get on with more of the story and lore, the thing you guys generally care to hear about from me, even though I might be trying to change that a little bit, but we'll see. There are a total of 6 full books that we have our hands on per the moment, or at least mostly full. There are some entries not available to us within, and I'll try to keep those moments to myself. The books are entitled Inquisition of the Damned, Aspect, Last Days on Kraken Mare, Letters from Eris, Luna's Lost, Revelation, and Unveiling. Per usual, IshtarCollective.net has been the place I go to and trust for these resources. In-game, however, we see that a few sections are missing, and whole pages are not available to us just yet. I might also add that it's super easy to get most of the lore this time around, because I think in the time that I've played, I have pretty much filled up most of the lore books just from palling around in the Hellmouth and finding the items to pick up and so on. I don't know, is it just me? Did I get lucky? Anyway, I should stress that unlike Truth to Power from Forsaken, Unveiling is truly being given to us piece by piece, page by page, delivered to us by Eris each week. I'm sure the files are there, but the API for the lore entries is not allowing them to be seen openly. Thus, at time of this recording, I only have 3 pages to reference. And spoilers, I'm not gonna do so. There is another book that fits this reference point as well, and that's the Inquisition book. Also, insert obvious Monty Python joke here.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
At current, within the Inquisition of the Damned book, we have up to number 11, the Anti-Logic, and it seems there's another entry added past that with each week. These are obtained from the small glyph totems on the ground in the Hellmouth, largely, but the story is the most important part. I just like to point out where you get them from if you kind of forget what that book title is or where you end up seeing it from, etc. We see 3 siblings of the Hive introduced, all with varying purposes. Akrazul, a knight who was injured beyond repair while defending Oryx at the time of our assault on the Dreadnought, or possibly with Crota. He blames Oryx, but I still question that overall. Azevoth, a death singer who seeked the perfect song, and Malkonth, a death weaver that looked into alternate forms of logic, or philosophy, that are counter to that of the nature of sword logic. In essence, these 3 see the way that sword logic is being made to benefit and strengthen only a few of the brood, but this has been proven to be false with the death of Crota, Oryx, and many other Hive champions. It seems whatever power they felt sword logic may have had over the Hive is now simply religious zealotry, and continuing to rely on it will be the downfall of the Hive as a whole. It's a very interesting read, and I do recommend to give it a look over. It does end where it all began, however, which I do find to be an interesting piece of this book. It also gives us some hints of what Hashladun is up to, and her ultimate want for her and her sisters to bring Oryx back from the dead. After all, it wouldn't be the first time the Hive are brought back from death. Speaking of, this is actually where we get the full list of the Daughters of Crota as well. They are Hashladun, Besserith, Vashir, and Kinox. Not much is known of Vashir and Kinox, but Hashladun and Besserith are killed through the Shadowkeep campaign. Whether they'll stay dead is to be seen. I don't want to go too much further with the book, as all of it isn't fully released yet, but that's the general idea of it. I do believe Byf has covered this book in total, or at least parts of it, as the title of the video in question seems to cover the exact pieces of this book, along with some extra lore I'll bring up at the end. If I'm at all honest, I try to stay away from other lore content just to make sure that my views are my own, though it does generally make me wonder how much more I am hard on myself and how little I actually get content out to you guys. Oh god, I just went down that path. Creator problems, don't listen to me. Keeping on this path, we'll talk about letters from Eris, which are given to us through the campaign as missions are completed and moments are uncovered. All of these letters deal with Eris' feelings as she is harried by the phantoms of her fallen friends. She sends these to 2 parties, and in doing so reveals some possible character traits of one of them. The first is Ikora, who she informs of the pyramid's existence and how our progress is going on Luna. The second, and most often spoken of, is Mare Sov. She sends her many letters, in fact, and the nature of some of them are highly revealing of Eris' mental state. Whether Mare truly cares for these notions is unknown, but I think it fair to assume she does, given that in the narrative preview, the 2 were together for quite some time. As I said before, this book goes over the feelings of Eris, but that's kind of where I want to leave things. I feel that extrapolating Eris' feelings are an incredibly important piece to understanding the underlying message of Shadowkeep as a whole, as it deals with mental states, mental health, religious ideologies, and several other pieces that can affect your mental health. It deals with some pretty heavy ideas, some of which I have personal relation to, but I digress. Luna's Lost is a book that is collected from the ghost traces that we find occasionally from looting helium filaments and chests on Luna. These ghosts that we find are all of different time periods, but most of them deal with the ghosts of the first Crota Fire Team. The messages contained are given to us in a bit of a before and after kind of rite, with the message that you hear from the ghosts themselves being their final recorded information, or at least that's what I assume. Most times that's what it feels like anyway when you go to pick them up. I definitely will recommend listening to the one about Toland at the least, if you don't care to hunt for any of them otherwise. I know I'll cover it at some point, but, if you want to listen to it early, that's what you can do. It's amazing how mad his ghost is along with him, and how often that doesn't always happen, like in the cases of ghost stories and ghosts not enjoying what their guardians do. I remember the one about Warlords, or Cyril the Ghost Hunter, and of course another popular one, but I talk about him enough. The final book that deals with Luna, largely, is that of Revelation. Revelation goes over the K1 project, which is a project run by the Chinese aeronautics branch and helped or funded by Clovis Bray. But that's where things are less crazy, really. I don't mean to skip ahead, but one thing that we do see is the idea of nationalism still very much existing on Earth. The Last Days on Kraken Mare covers the idea of the United States being a voluntary military pageantry nation, and it sounds like China is very close to its own personal interests as much as could be allowed with another larger corporation involved, one that seems to go way past the ideas of national borders. All to say, the Golden Age, well, might have changed some things, but it may not have changed a lot. Revelation largely deals with the lost sectors on Luna, and you can get most of the entries from there as well. Performing the weekly from Eris seems to be a surefire way to get them no problem as well for a long-term goal. As I feel a lot of details within this book require a lot more exploration, and they should, this book largely deals with concepts not atypical to other sci-fi. I think in particular back to that of Dead Space and the signal that is sent out by the black and red markers. The same seems to be the case with the pyramid that is underneath the lunar surface. The ending sets up a couple old grimoire cards quite well, and it also lines to another ghost traced from Luna's Lost, where it seems some were possibly modified at the DNA level while up on Luna. Basically, it's a dark book with some very dark segments, and it's just dark. It also doesn't have a happy ending. At all. The timing of where it's placed in the timeline is also a major question I have, and I wonder where it fits with the collapse. Is it just before? Is it way before? Is this part of the reason for the original fall of Clovis Bray? Alton Bray is talked about before, not Willa, who seemed to be at the head of the Rasputin project on Mars, so it's a question I have regardless. I get the feeling it's before the collapse, however, and we abandon Luna far before the collapse even hits, but that's me personally. Nothing really to go by with it. But that leads me to the Last Days on Kraken Mare again, which is happening right as the collapse appears to start. Something is being sensed out past the reaches of our solar system, and the residents of New Pacific Arcology are being told to pack up and go home. It's time to evacuate from whatever is coming. Mia van der Ven is in charge of the station, and she has several people on her crew that help to manage the motions of the Arcologies. One prominent member is David Miguel Korosek, who is the one we get the small info about the American nation and so on with this book. I don't know, that whole bit just seems a little off to me, but anyway. This book deals with a few main factors, and all of them come as quickly as they end. The first is the need to get close to 3 million people off of Titan and send them back home to Earth. The second is the effects that the darkness have on Titan itself, which also explains a long-wondered question of mine: why is Titan a complete methane ocean? The third is possibly the most notable, and that's how Clovis Bray, Rasputin, and the Exos under his command treated us at the end. I also love the symbolism at the end of the book, with a syzygy happening, swarmers being released, the crashing of the methane back to Titan. Sort of sounds like Fundament. Not that I am implying that Fundament is Titan, I just find the symbolism to be ironic all the same. Wonder if it's more just a piece to show a cycle exists in all of this. Maybe eventually the swarmers that are down underneath will grow to be worms and they pop up and they change the whole cycle of everything. Who knows? Some of these entries are much longer than usual, but it's also a fast read. The introduction of Crown 6, aka Morgan 2, also shows how Rasputin really worked with the Exos and made it so that they couldn't care less about humanity, minus some of the programming. But when resets are always a fear for these that don't cooperate, I can imagine it's a problem, especially after we know what we know about Cade and the resets he went through. These little games they play with this story. A few more aspects of the lore this time, including aspect. Yeah, I hate myself for that pun. This book goes over the awakening of the Undying Mind, the opening of the Black Garden again, and several other revelations of the Vex. One, for instance, is how the ones covered with greenery are feared by the other forces. And we get confirmation within the first entry alone that the Vex worshipped the Black Heart of the Black Garden. It was an aspect of the darkness, an aspect of what the Vex also had issues understanding before. There was power to be found with it, and even if we took it from them for almost 5 years ago now, they still expect it to return. In fact, the rising of the pyramid might be exactly why they are going after Luna as hard as they are, but that's beside the point. The other pieces of this book are a bit more important. Praedyth. Praedyth, one of the lost members of the Vault of Glass, locked in time, is able to communicate through a radio that he put together on his own from his old armor. Now, this isn't anything new, especially when we look back at the old Paradox mission, but I find it funny that that old radio kind of is still working for him. He comes in contact with some that operate on a frequency that will sound familiar. 227. This frequency alters for a good reason, because of who is on it. I mean, there are 227 groups of this 227. Yes, Praedyth talks to Maya Sundaresh, Chioma Essie, Dwayne McNiad, and Dr. Shim. How Praedyth keeps some of these groups separated is beyond me, but Praedyth is apparently just full of time anyway. There are way too many time puns that I can make, and I'm going to stop myself now. The teams have a goal in mind, and that's to attempt to get back out of the Vex network. How this happens is also interesting. As the Garden starts to awaken, so do the group's abilities to communicate. So Praedyth was lost in the vault, but he communicates with those in the Garden, but the Vex network is linked to the rest of it all, including the vault and the prison that Praedyth's in. You know, maybe the analogy is right. Fish in water versus ospreys grabbing the fish. The Vex are very much a hunter-prey situation here when it comes to our understanding of time. There's a lot of fun points to pick from this book, and just seeing the levels of communication between the 227 again, along with Praedyth, that's pretty darn cool. The last book is entitled Unveiling, and I'm not going to talk about it at all just yet. After all the bits with truth to power and such anyway, I'm not going to risk anything considering how the book is generally set up right now. Also considering how the voices we keep hearing are generally there to bring our mood down. No thank you. We'll talk about it again later. Maybe entry by entry if I decide to do a catch-up episode and do some easy content or something without a lot of extrapolation. But where's the fun in that? As it is, the title alone of the book could finally give us an indication of who we're talking to. Could. It could also just be, I am Eris Morn, but I'm really not truth to power. Ugh, that book. Well, before I keep on that note, Bungie also released 5 entries after a puzzle was fully solved in the Garden of Salvation raid, by the way. These 5 entries are all numbered and can easily be found on the Made Bungie Twitter. I'm sure we'll get some transcripts for them at some point posted to Ishtar, but in the meantime I'll try to remember them and leave them in the description down below if I do remember to do so. If I don't, yell at me. Thanks. But that basically covers all the lore books in a nutshell. Why did I do it this way instead of separating all the books out? Well, that's part of my master plan, because now you have a general idea about each of the books. And now I can focus on the stuff I actually want to talk about from them. There's a lot of tiebacks to old lore, and so I'll bring up the Grimoire audiobook one more time, since I'm slowly working on that here on the channel as well. We're getting close to our enemies within this series, and I have a feeling that a lot of that information is going to become paramount in understanding things going forward. Anyway, did I leave something out from even the basic understanding of everything? Think of anything else I'm missing from Shadowkeep? What have been your thoughts on it so far? Have you found yourself playing game modes you didn't before? Do you see a bright future? A bleak one? Just a future in general for Destiny? I'm curious for all of those thoughts below. Personally, I've been having a lot of fun with it, and going between the game and back to reading and writing lore and so on. It's just been nice again to kind of do. I just wish I had more time to do it. I have a lot of older theories and ideas that I still want to release your way as well, but just know that I think Season of the Drifter and Season of Opulence were getting us prepared for all of this and what's to come. Regardless, I think that's where I'll leave things for now as a general overview of Shadowkeep. I know there's a lot of you out there that might even be new, traveler or willing, that YouTube will recommend my stuff to any of you. If so, I hope you've been enjoying your time with Shadowkeep as well. Welcome aboard, Guardian. Eyes up. Anyway, before I keep going, to all of you, no matter when or where you are, I'll see you next space time. Take care.